Here are 7 creative ways to use a yoga block for proprioception, for novel sensory input, and to invite in some new experiences in familiar poses. So you might find that these suggestions help light up your yoga poses in some surprising ways, and they may help you get a little more out of your practice. So let's dive in. Our first creative yoga block move is a new way to practice fire hydrants. So let's first just look at what fire hydrants are. That's when we're in a tabletop position and we take one leg out to the side and we might hold it or bring it down and then go back out again. So the idea with fire hydrants is that we're targeting the lateral hip, the hip abductors on that moving leg hip, but we're also ideally targeting the hip abductors on the standing leg's hip, that they're working to stabilize us, keep us still. So what tends to happen, and I actually showed it, I tried to show it when I was showing my demo, but what we often do without realizing it is as we take the leg out, we kind of shift over to the side. And now I'm like exaggerating it a little bit, where everything leans over. And this effectively makes the pose easier, and it reduces the actual work that both outer hips have to do. So here's where the blocks come in, and they really help us sense our body better in space, and they can help our proprioception in the moment. So I like to use 2 blocks, but you could also just use 1 for this. We stack them up and now it's a block wall. Then we set up in our tabletop right next to the wall. So now I have this wall of blocks, and this is effectively going to keep me from shifting over to the side. If I do shift to the side, I'll knock them over and then it'll be obvious. So they're there. I know that they're there. And now when I fire hydrant, I have to really truly hold everything else still and only move that leg. And I can already feel, just as I'm demoing this, like a little cramping in this lifted hip. It feels a lot different than the first time that I showed those fire hydrants. So this is a great way to help us, again, sense our body better in space and help us make our fire hydrants more effective. Our second creative yoga block move is for plank and chaturanga. So it's for these poses. And what the block will do is it will help bring in some more sensory input to this pose so that we end up working our core, our anterior core more. So what often happens in plank, and then especially as we lower into chaturanga, is sometimes we see this. See how I'm kind of sticking my hips up here? We kind of unknowingly, we don't often realize it, but we arch through the low back as we lower down. And that's because it's a really hard movement to lower down like that. And by arching the spine, we kind of offload some of the work in the core. So we can use a yoga block to help us sense our spine in space, give us some feedback back here, and it'll help us keep the position that we want through the spine and pelvis to help target the anterior core more. So we simply take the block onto the low back area, so like between the rib cage and the pelvis. We come into plank pose, and then we think of pressing up into the block. So it's like we want to lift the block up, and it's subtle, but we're lifting our low back up into the block, and that is asking us to posteriorly tilt our pelvis, which will fire up our anterior core more so that we're less likely to avoid the work. And then maybe we are just working on this here in plank, so we can hold plank pose and just be here, but notice the difference between pushing up into the block and not. And then we also could take this down into chaturanga. We could lower, but as we lower, we keep pushing up into the block rather than arching away from the block. And we'll be able to sense our position and feel our position because of that block. So that is an excellent use of a block for some novel sensory input to help us get more out of plank and chaturanga. Our third creative yoga block move is a hip stability move, and here's how it works. We set the block down, we stand in front of the block. Then I've got my right foot in front of the block. I'll take my right foot and I will slide the block back. Now, the further back it goes, the more challenging this will be, and I'm challenging my standing legs, hips. or hip. So I reach back there and all of that makes me wobble and it's messy and that's totally part of it. But as I reach back, I have to wobble and then this front hip has to stabilize and work to maintain my stability on one leg. So once it's back there, then I step forward. And that was great, but that's not even the whole move. So now my other foot, now my left foot has to reach back there and get the block. So the further back I slide it, the harder that it will be. And I kind of slid it back pretty far. But I'll reach back with my other foot now and see now I'm loading into the standing leg. And doesn't this kind of look like warrior three, but more of an intentionally, variable loading warrior three, because I've got this extra movement happening. So anyway, I reach back with the other foot, I find the block, I messily bring it forward, and then once it's forward, I can actually slide it forward now, and as I do that, I'm loading into the standing leg like a single leg squat. Then I come to stand. And now the other foot, the right foot, reaches forward, so I have to single leg squat, loading the left leg, and then just however I need to make it work, I grab that block, I slide it back and reach back. I'm loading into this leg, but there's all this great wobbling happening, which is challenging the hip stability. And then we just keep going like that. So then I would switch. So I've got it, it's like off to the side, it's back there. I have to reach back like into warrior three, really challenge my balance as I scoot this forward and then forward. Then I slide it forward. The further forward it goes, the more I will load into this standing leg. So it's like a little loop that we can do with the block. And then you can change directions so that we kind of even it out. But anyway, that is a great creative yoga block move. Our fourth creative yoga block move is kind of a variation of Supta Padangusthasana. So that is our reclined hamstring stretch in yoga, where we lie back, one leg is down, one leg is up, and we stretch here. Maybe we use a yoga strap or hold here. But this is Supta Padangusthasana. And I love it. But a novel variation we can bring in is to take our yoga block and place it on the lifted foot. So having to hold the block on the foot, there instantly is a stability challenge. So our whole leg has to work to hold the block up there and keep it steady so that it doesn't fall. And then for this Supta Padangusthasana variation, it's fun to start with both legs up, feet side by side, but one foot has the block. And then that block will stay there. We will preserve my left leg here. It stays just as it is. As I lower my right leg down, and then, you could go all the way to the floor or not, like hover above the floor, and then lift back up. So the block keeps me so that my left leg stays stabilized and still. And then as my right leg lowers, this will bring on, it starts to stretch the tissues along the back of the left leg. So it brings on the hamstring stretch, but as the leg holds itself up there. So it's a really great kind of proprioception drill. And it's just a different way to experience a Supta Padangusthasana-like pose. Our fifth creative yoga block move is chair pose with a block. But it is not chair pose with the block in between the inner thighs. It's not that. Instead, it is chair pose with the block under one foot, just under one foot. So it's one foot up on the block, and then we start standing upright. This is Tadasana, basically. This would be like this, except it's Tadasana with one foot up. So it's asymmetrical, two different sides doing two different things. And then we would lower down into our chair pose with the feet at different levels. And it's such a great new way to experience the pose and can just expose us to some different asymmetrical loading and gives us, our nervous system, something new to notice and work to control. So I've got my foot up, I lower down, and it's not, this creative block move is not just this. It could be, you could just do this, but I like a little sequence around it. So I like to do this. I come into chair pose with the foot up. I notice how it feels different. Then I intentionally shift my weight into the left leg here, the foot that's on the floor. I lift my foot on the block up. And then I sweep back to warrior three and just work a little balance here. Come back forward, replace the foot on the block, sink back down into chair pose. Then, this is where it gets extra fun. Then I shift my weight into my right leg. I'll notice how it feels different as I now lift my left foot off the floor and sweep back to warrior three, but now I have warrior three up on the block, which is its own excellent stability challenge, being up on the block versus on the floor. And then we come forward, we lightly place our foot down, back to asymmetrical chair pose, and back to standing. So asymmetrical chair pose to warrior three, and it's a little sequence, all with the block under one foot. Our sixth creative yoga block move is low lunge windmill at the wall. So this is a great way to use the yoga block to help us with proprioception and sensing where our body is in space so that we keep our lower half still, so that we can rotate our upper half and work on some great spinal rotation and thoracic rotation kind of specifically. So here's how it works. So low lunge, not at the wall, looks like this. And you might do something like come into a twist in low lunge, bringing in some rotation. But we are in the middle of the room here. There's nothing wrong with that at all, but we are, and it can be a little hard to kind of sense our body and hold everything still so that we just rotate the chest. So what we can do instead, especially if we really want to work on isolating just the spine and that rotation, is we come to a wall. We take a yoga block. It's going to go between my hip and the wall. So my hip will pin the block to the wall. So like that. And now I am anchored. My front leg, but really my whole lower body is anchored here. And I could take my arms up. There are a couple ways we could do this. So we could come into low lunge and then open into the twist. Already I feel like how much more effective this is for my rotation, and then we can de-rotate back. But another kind of fun and fluid way that I like to do this is start just with the arms down, and then one arm sweeps up. We can actually touch the wall, so then we get this tactile feedback to guide us up and over, and then naturally your other arm comes up, and here we are in that rotated position, and then we can come back out, back to the starting position. We can sweep up and just repeat this. So it's dynamic rotations with these windmill arms, and all of it with our hip pinned to the block, pinned to the wall. So it makes our mobilization of the thoracic spine more effective. Our seventh and final creative yoga block move is an extra special one. So you may know of the suboccipital muscles, but this is a group of muscles that lines the base of our skull, and they run horizontally all along at the bottom of our skull, like between our skull and the top of our neck, the suboccipitals. This is an area of the body that tends to really appreciate a little massage attention every now and then. And so this block move is going to be a suboccipital massage using our block. Now I love to do this with a block that has like slightly rounded edges. That will just tend to be a little more comfortable than a block that has super sharp edges. So just FYI. And then here's what we do. We'll take the block, we'll lie our head back on the block, and our aim will be to take a rounded edge and just find our suboccipitals with it. And then the weight of our head gets to lie on the block, and we might turn our head, you'll see. But so the block goes here, but it won't stay totally flat. Instead, we'll need to angle it. See how I'm like lifting one edge? We typically will need to angle it up a little bit so that it can really angle right into those suboccipitals. But this will be a little personalized, like you'll find the exact right spot for yourself. But see, if I keep the block just straight, then I just kind of end up with my head up there and I'm not really getting right into those muscles. So instead, I tip the block just slightly until I can get that exact angle where this edge of the block can dig right into my suboccipitals. Then I just let my head relax. This might be perfect here, but you could also lightly turn your head side to side, and that's gonna bring the massage a little more around the edges. So it's a great way to offer a little self-massage to an area of the body that tends to really appreciate it. So let me know if you give the suboccipital massage with the yoga block a try, and let me know what you think. And if you appreciated this content, subscribe to my channel so you could stay up to date on all of the tips that I share.